Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. We're going to be having a conversation today about making wise investments over time. But this time, it's not just going to be about time, although time is definitely going to be pulled into this conversation. We're going to be talking about financial stewardship for us as Christian women business owners. And I've invited my friend Leah Hadley to come and join us today because she knows a whole lot more about the financial side of investing than I do. And I thought this would be a great conversation. So, Leah, welcome to the Redeem for Time podcast. It's been fun getting to know you over the past couple of weeks and months, but my audience doesn't know you yet. So tell us about you. Like, what does life look like in this season of business, leadership, serving women through some pretty major life transitions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, it is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you and your audience. I am based out of Cleveland, Ohio. I have three kids that are very close to being all grown up. My oldest just graduated, or excuse me, just finished his first year of college.
Wow.
My middle one is headed into her senior year of high school, and then my youngest is 14. So
Wow. It goes
everybody's kind of
fast, doesn't it?
transitioning out. Yeah. I run two businesses. So, Intentional Wealth Partners is financial planning and portfolio management, and Intentional Divorce Solutions is really helping people navigate the financial challenges that come along with going through the divorce process. We also have mediation and divorce coaching on the team as well. And I'm celebrating 10 years in business this year, which is kind of like
Wow.
mind blowing. I don't even know where the time went. But I feel very, very fortunate to be in this space and time. And as part of that celebration, I came out with the book that I know we'll be talking a little bit more about, but it's called Intentional Money, The Modern Woman's Guide to Building Wealth, Purpose, and Peace. And that just came out a couple months ago.
Congratulations, first of all, on 10 years. That is, that's huge. When you think about most businesses are not making it to even like the 5 year mark, let alone the 10-year mark. So
Yeah.
that says a lot. And I know that you've invested a lot of time and probably a lot of money and, and energy and effort over those 10 years. And I love that you're seeing such a great return on that time invested, as you're helping people with something that's so tangible, our finances, and then also coming alongside women in a really, significant transition period where we need to make some important decisions. So I would love to hear, because I know your background was doing, equity research. And then, now for these last 10 years, you've been helping women navigate those kinds of decisions. Like, what was it that led you from, what you were doing before to what you're doing now? And what might be really like lights you up about it and gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, so in equity research, I actually started my career as a teacher. So I did
Okay.
not start in financial services at all.
What did you teach?
But I taught third grade in Baltimore City Public Schools. I
Okay.
love that age. I think it's a wonderful age. But it was a tough school that I was in, and I got very burnt out quickly in the classroom. I really struggled. And I had a ton of student loan debt at the time. And so I just needed to find a job, Lisa. Like, I was just like, I got to pay the bills, right? And I took a temp job that happened to be at an investment bank. It was an administrative assistant position in the equity research department. But if you had asked me what equity research was when I walked in that first day, I would not have had a clue. I had never taken an accounting class. I had never taken a finance class. My undergraduate degree was in sociology. My master's degree was in education. And so I felt like a fish out of water. And I share that story regularly with people because a lot of times when people are talking about their finances, sometimes they're talking about their finances for the first time. There's a whole vocabulary that can feel very intimidating for people, not language that they're used to using. And so I remember that time very well. I was very fortunate though. Some wonderful, wonderful mentors who were basically like, you're never going to make any money doing what you're doing right now. Like, why don't you learn what we do here? And so I started to learn about equity research. I went to another firm later on after this was like, I started in 2006. So this is when the whole industry was kind of consolidating and, things were changing. But I ultimately became a publishing senior equity research analyst. I covered consumer durables as well as some specialty retail. And I wanted to have a family. And that job required a lot of travel. It required a lot of hours, especially during earnings season. Just not a lot of control over my time in that particular role. And that wasn't the way that I wanted to raise my kids. And so I decided to start working with individuals and families. I was working as a financial advisor with a large broker dealer. And they had kind of one way of doing business. And a lot of times, Lisa, I'm not good at fitting in the box. I like to I
Don't
like to
tell
be
me what to
outside the
do.
box. So I left there after a few years. I went to another broker dealer. Ultimately, I decided, if I really want to support people in a way that feels in alignment for me, then I need to open up my own practice. And so
Yeah.
in 2016, I got started.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I love how you made really intentional decisions in your journey around what you wanted your time to look like,
Yeah.
and the things that you wanted to be able to invest in and at the same time still be able to provide the financially for them. And I think, there's so many parallels between time and money. We talk about stewardship a lot here on the podcast. And there was a book that I read with my CEOs a couple of months ago called Kingdom Stewardship. And it's talking about stewarding our time, our talents, and our treasures, right? And so our time and money things both fit inside there. And as a steward, we have to make really intentional decisions about where we're investing. And yes, not always perfectly. Sometimes we're, imperfectly, but it is something that we do need to be addressing. But what I find is that the problem is that so many women feel overwhelmed when it comes to money decisions. Not just because they don't know what they don't know, but I think they're juggling all these things in their head. They've got business and family and this pressure and, their own health and wellness and just feel like maybe there's not enough time to figure it out. So let's kind of talk about like how does maybe financial stress drain our time, our mental and emotional bandwidth? Like how is it costing us if we don't give it the time and attention that we need to?
The biggest thing with financial decisions in particular, there's a reason why they say time is money, right?
Mm,
When we look at the power of compounding over time, the sooner you get started with anything, the harder your money can work for you. But
right.
so many people sit in this space of indecision and struggle because they don't have the confidence to make those decisions. And you really do lose out on a tremendous amount of value if you're sitting in that kind of unknown and not making decisions. So I always encourage people, first and foremost, though, to get really clear on what is the decision they're trying to make. So a lot of times people get really focused on one thing, and that's not actually what matters. That's not actually like
Mm,
what the decision is based on. They just get very like focused on this one thing. It comes up with divorce cases all the time. I mean, people joke about like people fighting over a toaster, but there's so many examples of that because we get super targeted on something and we're missing the bigger picture. And so a
mm,
lot of times we need to take a step back and see like, where does this decision even fit into my life? And how can I get super crystal clear on what am I actually thinking and talking about in order to make sure that I'm even making the decision that needs to be made, right?
yeah. 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 I love that. And that kind of like brings me to this place I was thinking about when you told your story, you talked about how your values and your beliefs really helped shape the decisions you were making, right? So
Absolutely.
so how do our values and beliefs and maybe our emotions around money quietly affect not just how we spend money, but of course this has a ripple effect in how we spend time and where our energy goes and our attention. What's going
Yeah.
on when those things
This
aren't
is
in alignment?
something that we work really hard. We have a membership community called the Empowered Sisterhood, and this is something that we
Mm,
really work hard on in our conversations in the sisterhood because the fact of the matter is a lot of us don't even recognize these underlying messages that may be going through our brains while we're thinking about making a financial decision. And for a lot of folks, people are raised that money is not something that we talk about. This is like a
mm,
taboo conversation. It's off the table. There are a lot of people who have been told for years, decades, sometimes their entire lives that they're bad with money. Sometimes people are making assumptions around money itself being evil
mm,
rather than kind of the actions that people may take. And so there's all of this baggage that a lot of us bring to the table when it comes to dealing with money. And so I really encourage people to get some clarity, start to bring these things to the light so we can really examine them and see like, is this helping me to get where I want to go? Is this helping me to be a better steward, right? Or
mm.
is this holding me back, right? And the clearer that we can get around some of these messages, then we can start to really acknowledge and recognize how they're impacting our decisions. But when we just have them kind of going on in the background, we're not paying attention to them, we don't even realize, you said kind of quietly impacting us, but even though they might be quiet voices, they are very loudly impacting
Yeah.
everything that you're doing.
Yeah, usually you wake up one day and all of a sudden it's like a big bang, right? And
Right,
you're like, where did this just come from? I love
right.
that you're starting there because I think so often everybody just wants to jump into the tell me what to do with my money.
Yes.
And really, both in what you talk about around money, what I talk about around time, it's not about the amount necessarily that you have. It's
Right.
always going to be first, like, what's that perspective, that mindset? What are my beliefs? How am I approaching this? Because if we don't actually address that, no amount of money or no amount of time that we think we need is going to make a difference because
That's
it's
right.
still gonna, yeah, be impacted in the same way. So there has to be this intention around it, which is why I love that you've created the intentional money method. Intentional is one of my big words. I love it. So if you don't mind, without giving away all your secrets, unpack that a little bit for us. Like, tell us what
Yeah.
does it look like to be intentional with our money, and why is maybe the way you're teaching it different from financial advice, that's out there in traditional sources and something that we should spend some time implementing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much of what we've been talking about already. It really starts with clarity.
Mm,
So many people don't have clarity, not only around their current financial situation, which you can gather your statements and look at all of that, but also where they're going, where they want to go, what really matters to them, what's really important to them. There's so much messaging out there on social media, on all these, there's just a lot of noise out there that a lot of times people are not taking the time to get really quiet and think about like, what's really important for me and for my family. I was literally talking with a client earlier today, and she was telling me we were talking about, sometimes with clients, they like to talk about like, what is enough money? Like, how much do I need to, like, what does this enough look like? And she and I were talking about this, and her father had communicated a certain number that was enough. And once she reached that number, she could kind of relax in her life. And listen, it was a very large number. And so I like walked through with her. I was like, look, that's fine. And absolutely, you will be very comfortable with that number. But let's look at whether or not that's really the number that is enough for you, for your needs, for the life that you're creating for yourself and for your children. And she doesn't need anywhere near the number that her
mm,
dad was communicating to her. Now, I'm sure he had reasons for coming up with that number. And obviously, she respects her father and you know what, but when we get really clear on what's important to us, what really matters to us, what our needs are, what the life that we really want, like not, I need this fancy car because the neighbor just got the fancy car, right? But like what really matters to me, most people actually find that they don't need as much as they thought they did. And that is such an empowering place to be because it takes the pressure off of you, right? But that clarity, having the time, taking the space to get clear on where you are and where you want to go is so incredibly valuable. And I'm just amazed at how many people don't take the time for that first pillar of the intentional money method. The next two are also ones that I find are really missing in most financial conversation. And that was what we were talking about before, Alyssa, around values, right? Our values, what matters to us, that can be a wonderful driver for your financial decision making. But so often we don't even look at that filter through the values, right? We're looking at, we're hearing all these other messages. And when we get really clear on what our priorities are, what we value, what we really want to bring close to us in our lives, decision making becomes so much easier. Because suddenly, first of all, there are many fewer decisions to be made, period, right? I'm sure you see that with people kind of allocating time as well, right? When you get really clear on what matters, you know how to prioritize, right? It's just a different conversation. And then the third pillar is mindset. And the mindset piece, that's what we were talking about before, those messages that are going on in the background. It might be messages that came from your family, maybe it came from your spouse, maybe your social circle, even again, social media, the news, things like that. You can pick these things up and internalize them from all different kinds of places. But a lot of times those messages aren't serving us. They're not helpful. They may be things that we internalize that there's no reason for it. It's okay. It's safe to let some of that messaging go. And so part of that intentional money method is really bringing these things to the light so that way we can unpack them. And that way, when we are ready to take action, when we're ready to make strategic decisions, then we have our mindset in such a way that we can do it with confidence and we can feel good about those decisions. Those are the three main pillars that are kind of outside of what traditional financial services talks about.
Yeah, I love that because I often say, if you're going on a road trip, right? If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, and you're also going to get nowhere. And
Right.
so nobody's going to take off on a road trip unless they're just looking to waste time and money. And yet, so often we're just like blinders on, like, what's the next thing in front of me? Not really looking up to go, and where am I going? So that
Yeah.
way we can start mapping out, what I call a growth map to get from where we are. I love how you said that to where we want to be. And it really doesn't have to be that hard, but if you don't know where you're going, then yeah, it's going to be, you're just going to be going with, what should I turn left or right here, right? And we're going to be probably pulling off on all the little roadside rests and things like that along the way. So I love that. It just those milestones are really, really important. And I want you to speak a little bit to earning with intention because I know you talk about that. Again, this brings this intentional thing in here. I think we do the same thing with time, right? We need to invest our time with intention. So when someone has intention, right, we're aligning the way we earn, we spend, we invest with our values, our priorities, our season of life. What's the different outcome when we do it that way versus maybe spending or investing or things like that out of pressure or like you said, some expectations or obligations that we feel and things like that. What happens when we start shifting and using these things that you're showing us today?
Well, one of the things that I found that is just so awesome about being a business owner is you get to decide what you offer. You get to decide what you sell, when you sell, how you sell, right? And in my own business, I had come out of equity research. I had been a financial advisor for several years before I started my own business, but I had a lot of just like really in-depth analytical skills. There was a lot that I could do. And at that point, I had gone through my own divorce. I was a single mom at that point. Like I just needed money. And so I would take on random projects, like analytical projects. I did like a big project for an aviation company. I used to do a ton of forensic work on like divorce cases that required in-depth forensic analysis. Those things, they really drained me. Like I just did not feel good doing that work and being in that space. I made really good money. That would not have been sustainable for me. It just truly depleted my energy on a daily basis. I really love the kind of impact that we can make in helping people reach their financial goals. When we support people through the divorce process, we're really looking at how can we make that transition for people as easy as possible. We're not looking for, additional conflict, but how can we work through it in a constructive manner, right? That's what fuels me. That's what lights me up. And so then I have the energy and the excitement to build the business, to lead my team, to do these things. And I'm not constantly fighting every single day the things that are draining me. And I think that's incredibly empowering. And if you can own that as a business owner, because you absolutely do have that ability, you can make those adjustments and you can see within my business what does fuel me and what does deplete me, and where is the need in the market and how do I want to adjust the business to meet the need in the market and things like that. For me, that was a really, really powerful experience. And it's the only thing that's kept me in business this long. Honestly, if I hadn't made those changes, I can tell you I definitely would have been burnt out at this point in time.
Yeah, it's so important that we are aligned with what our values are, our beliefs are, what we know that God has called us to, and even in the season we're in, and like I'm hearing parts of your story, right? Like you've had different seasons along the
Mhm.
way. And so bandwidth look different, priorities look different, your time probably look different. And so here's where you have to make those intentional decisions around what I say, what is it time for? To be able to invest in that way. So I love this. And here's the fun thing about time and money. They're both things that we can either waste we can spend or we can invest. And I know that the women who listen to my show, like they want to be wise investors because we know that when you invest in something, there's a return that we're looking to get back. So whether it's an ROI or an ROTI in my world, it all comes back to that stewardship place. So let's kind of wrap it up here and say, okay, so how does having the clarity you've talked about today, how does having this kind of confidence around money help us stop being in just that survival mode and start making those wiser long-term decisions that are going to compound over time? Because, like you said, the best time to start investing is, it was 30 years ago, right? Second best time is today.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So the last three pillars of the intentional money method are strategy, action, and support. And strategy is really where we've taken a look at where you are and where you want to go. We've gotten really clear on your values and really cleared out some of the stuff that might be holding you back. Now we can really get in tune with what is the right strategy for you. And there is so much conversation out there, Lisa, around just put your money in passive index funds and move on with your day. And there's nothing wrong with that advice, to be clear. But you can also invest in such a way that fills you up, that gets you excited. I love investing in my business because I know the kind of impact we're able to make in people's lives. That gets me excited. And so I know for myself, that's a big part of my overall strategy is looking at how can I continue to reinvest and grow the business that I have, right? But obviously, I'm a financial planner. I'm always looking at risk too, and I never want to put too much concentration in any one specific area. Diversification is really important tool for risk management. And so I like to look at what kind of impact I want to have beyond the business that I'm creating, right? Especially for people who are, faith centered. There's so many options available to you that can really truly be in alignment with your faith that you might not even be thinking about, right? These are the things that get people excited. I personally am a huge proponent of empowering women and women in business in particular. And so there are some funds out there that are specifically geared toward those companies that lift women up within the company. And so I love being an investor in those kinds of funds, right? That excites me. But there's so many examples like that. It doesn't have to be something, it can be boring, absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with it. And you can do your consistent boring thing, but it doesn't have to be. There are so many options in terms of how you choose to invest your money. And the important thing, though, is that we start with the filters that we talked about. Is it helping you to get you where you want to go? Sometimes people make decisions that are more like gambling, where they're just trying to get a return very quickly. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about being strategic and thoughtful and making really methodical decisions about how you handle your finances, right?
Yeah, and that's what stewardship is all about, right? Because
Right.
ultimately we understand that it all doesn't belong to us and it's not going to last forever, right? It'll eventually be in someone else's hands when we
That's
are no
right.
longer here. And so how do we intentionally and wisely steward it in alignment with the values that we have and the things that God has called us to? So I love this. And I love that, this has just been such a good reminder that we don't want to live in reaction mode. And like you said, trying to get the quick wins. We're looking for what is really going to bring growth over time. And that wise stewardship isn't just about finances, right? It impacts so many areas of our life, our peace, our priorities, the way that, like you shared, we approach our business and our life and things like that. So, as we're wrapping up, what's one practical first step or next step that a listener can take that would help her to start being more intentional when it comes to her finances?
Really, really encourage people. That clarity piece is so powerful. I know it sounds simple, but if you're out of touch with your finances, you're not necessarily clear on when money's coming in, how much is coming in, where it's coming from, or when money's going out, how much is going out, where it's, going to. If you're struggling with debt or you have an investment account here, there, and everywhere, right? Like, first of all, totally normal if any of these things I'm describing, totally normal, but take some time, get some clarity. Sometimes just going through the process of like getting organized and consolidating things just will save you so much time and just in terms of the management of it, but also allow you that clarity, that like consistent clarity. And I encourage people to sit down and look at their accounts at least once a quarter. Just take a look at your overall, where everything is. Sometimes that wakes you up to something that needs to be addressed. But just kind of keeping in touch in that way can be really powerful.
Yeah, I always say as CEOs, we have to know our numbers, and that is really important when it comes to our finances as well. So great. Well, tell us a little bit about your free resource, who it's for, what we can get from it, where we can find it.
Yeah, so we talked all about investing today. So I want to offer you all a free ebook on intentional investing for women. And it really walks you through how to think about setting up your strategy. How do you think about kind of where you are in life, when you might need the funds, how much risk to take? But it's written in very plain English. And so even the beginner will absolutely benefit from it.
Perfect. Good. We'll make sure we link that down in the show notes. And I always invite our audience and our guests to come over into the Redeem Her Time community where we can have conversation off the podcast and start really thinking about what are the things that I'm looking for and how do I start creating clarity. So I want to invite everyone who's listening. If you're not already a member, you can come find us at redeemhertime.com/community. It's a great community of Christian women in business who want to be faithful, who want to be fruitful with our time and our money, and who want to be wise stewards as we intentionally invest both of those really important resources. So come and check us out over there, and we'll keep the conversation going. So thank you so much, Leah, for sharing your wisdom with us today, a little bit of your story. I know that this is such an important area. I love that you're making a difference in so many ways in this and helping women to feel empowered and equipped as they steward their money and their time. And so, in closing, I always love to end with one of my signature questions, and that is, what is it time for? So, as this is coming out in mid-May, and we're stepping into the summer season, how would you answer that question? What is it time for, and why do you want to see a good return on that time invested?
Yes, so for me, I live in the Cleveland, Ohio area. So we have a very long winter and a very short summer. So for me, it is time for family and to be outside. And I think investing in relationships will pay off dividends for your life.
For sure. Us Midwest girls got to enjoy the summer while we have it. So I know
That's
that'll be
right.
a great, yeah, return on that time invested. So thank you so much for being with us, Leah. We will see you guys next time.